Hi everyone, it's me Arden Lee, and in this video I want to talk about the difference between codependency and epic love. You might hear that and you might think, Arden, aren't those completely the opposite ends of the spectrum? Aren't those two completely oppositional polarities? If we're speaking about codependency, we're speaking about love that is rooted in insecurity, in unhealthy attachment. And epic love should be the opposite of that, right? Epic love should be true love, true freedom, true meeting of two souls that is in everyone's highest good, not a love where we compromise ourselves, right? Absolutely. Absolutely, all those things are true. And yet, as someone who was, I would say I was a former codependent. I think codependent is a reductive way of looking at it, but certainly my former relationship behavior shares a lot of traits in common with codependency. So I will say, for the sake of this video, as a former codependent, I actually believe that one of the reasons that people with codependent behaviors get so attached to love and relationships is actually because they hold the blueprint of epic true love within them. So hear me out on this one. I love my codependents. I love my codependent folk out there, even though at times they are so attached to their own cycles of love and loss and longing that sometimes, sometimes it can be frustrating. You want to shake them out of that cycle and get them to really step into their worth. But the reason that I relate to them so much is that, having been there myself, my belief is that codependents act in the way that they do precisely because they know just how amazing love really is. And what we feel is that there must be something that we're doing wrong if we haven't achieved that. And that can set in very early. That can set in as early as childhood. It's not, oh, we get to age 30 or 40 or whatever, and all of a sudden, if we haven't achieved that yet, then we start compromising. These compromises can start at a very early age. But I know for myself that I came into this world with a deep understanding that true love was absolutely everything that it's cracked up to be. I remember being a young child and feeling frustrated that I was a child and I wasn't really allowed to experience love on an adult level. I remember waiting around as a child to be able to grow up so that I could date people, right? Because I thought dating was the most exciting thing in the world. And I remember getting to my teenage years and still being awkward, disassociated, traumatized, really, is what was going on, though I wouldn't have known that at the time necessarily. I wouldn't have known that word to use anyway. And, weird enough that I didn't get into the same kind of relationships that my peers were getting into. Frankly, looking back, it's because I was actually on some level holding out because I knew that real, true, epic love was not the kind of relationships that my high school friends were having, right? Or certainly not the ones that were available to me. And the longer it went, the more I started to convince myself that something was wrong with me, that I wasn't getting into these relationships like everyone else was. I was 22 before I had my first boyfriend. I was 22 before I even had sex for the first time. So I was a pretty late bloomer. And along the way, I began to believe that love was so rare, so scarce, that I was going to have to, I wouldn't have been able to articulate it this way at the time, but that it was so rare and so scarce that I was going to have to in some way compromise myself, inevitably. The sacrifice, and I romanticized this a lot, the sacrifices I would make, right? All the things that I would do for my true love when I finally found that person. And then, of course, we get into relationships and our pair bonding hormones kick in and we get feelings for a person. And then we do whatever we can do to keep them, right? We feel really attached to them. And we end up abandoning ourselves and compromising ourselves and having zero boundaries and allowing people to walk all over us, hoping that if we're just good enough, that we'll be loved. Finally, someone will see all the effort that we're putting in. Finally, we'll be appreciated on that magical day when we just do enough, right? Or we are enough. This cycle took me well into adulthood. Well, I guess I was already an adult when I started dating, right? So I had a lot of beliefs. And looking back now, objectively, I actually look back and it's funny because I'm like, of course I wasn't suited for teenage relationships. Of course, my idea of relationships even then was something that was not going to be the norm in my social circles around me. And of course, for those of you who know my history, you know, I went and became a pickup artist because I was so far from the worthiness that I needed to know that I was worthy of love just as I was, and that really that was the key to love, is that self-acceptance that allows our true self to show through so that we can be actually loved for what we are. But I think what's really interesting is that during that time, I got into a lot of relationships where I would be super extra with things, you know, super extra in terms of spoiling people, having grand, epic adventures, going out of my way to create exciting peak experiences. And at the time, I was doing that from a place of scarcity, right? I was doing that from a place of, I have to be exciting, I have to be entertaining. The moment that this person is bored in my presence, I'm going to lose them. So I'm always thinking 10 steps ahead. And in going into the, I guess, roughly 3-year period of near celibacy, certainly intentional isolation that I took for my trauma healing process, I was always kind of curious. I was like, you know, I secretly got a lot of joy, not so secretly, I got a lot of joy out of doing those really grand gestures, those big epic adventures with another person. The difference was that in those relationships, I couldn't imagine that anyone else would be able to meet me there. I hadn't met anyone in any of my social circles at that point who was playing on my level. And if I had, I probably would not have felt worthy of that person. I ended up dating a lot of people who couldn't play on my level because I wanted to have these grand epic adventures in love. And I didn't believe that people like me really existed, or that if they did, that they'd want to be with me. Or that it felt impossible to find them, or whatever it was. Obviously I was settling. But I always wondered, looking back, I was like, you know, so many of those things I did, even if they were super extra, were really from a genuine place of joy. Was that really codependent? And as I've emerged from that cocoon now, and I'm exploring dating and relating, and I'm so much more comfortable being in my own center. I've dealt so much with my fears of abandonment. I've gotten real comfortable being alone. And I've gotten real comfortable with not feeling attachment to anything that doesn't want to be in my field. Which means I really only want what is in alignment with me. I am done trying to force a puzzle piece that doesn't want to fit. And as long as everything feels in alignment and in flow and everything's happy, then wonderful. But the minute something, I'm not going to abandon myself or compromise myself to try and keep something that doesn't want to be kept. So there's our difference. But what's really interesting is the other difference is I find myself doing so many of the same things that I did in my former dating and relating experiences that are these grand epic adventures, that are taking a risk, making a big leap, doing an exciting project, making art, going on adventures, doing things that cost money, doing things that require an investment, traveling. These sort of big things that before I didn't think I could be met on. And I was doing them out of a belief, well, no one can do that with me, so I'll just do it and I'll take care of that part of the relationship, and surely the other person won't abandon me because they'll love to come along in all these epic adventures that I'm planning, right? I was adding so much value to relationships, thinking that I would never be met and that it was up to me to add all of the value. So I was compromising by saying, oh, well, I'll never have this returned to me, so I might as well just do it because it's what I want to do. And now I'm beginning to see that there are people out there who will meet and will do all sorts of epic things together. And it's not coming from that place of scarcity. And it's not coming from that place of overcompensation. It's coming from the fact that these two people are meeting and they're committing to playing on the same level with one another. I've seen that in some couples around me too. I've seen couples who, their second or third date has been a long vacation, right? And they decide, well, why not? Let's go for it. Let's take the trip together. Let's commit to a big adventure. Let's do a big project together and we'll see how that goes. And the difference is that they're both playing on that same level, that one person is not allowing themselves to compromise and settle for someone who can't play on that level because they know their worth and they know what it feels like to be matched, to be met in that energy, and they can believe in its possibility because they can imagine it. And they can believe that that's something that they can achieve for themselves, which I did not. And because if they do discover incompatibilities or deal breakers or reasons that they need to walk away from the relationship, they're not afraid to do that. They're not doing these things on an unconscious, out of an unconscious desire to keep a person. They're doing them because that's simply the way that they want to live life. And let me tell you, that is super epic. And when you get two people who are both a great big yes to that lifestyle of adventure and boldness and grand gestures and all kinds of things that are in the realm of the sublime, really, especially when done with a lover. Accessing the sublime through that creation of peak experience with one another. Wow, that's so incredible. And for a really long time, I knew how great that was or could be. I just had a limiting belief over not being able to imagine anyone being able to meet me there. So I was like, well, I'll just do it, right? I was living in New York. I was dating in the rock and roll scene in New York. It was not it was not what I would call a hotbed of mental health and of stability, either emotional or financial, um, or frankly of a lot of the kind of freedom needed to create those epic adventures. Because when we do that with people, we're typically doing that with people who have the bandwidth for it, right? Who have the freedom in their and the space in their lives to be able to go on that last minute impulse vacation or sign up for that exciting transformative retreat event or whatever those things are that people are doing together. That requires a level of play and flexibility that exists in a certain sphere of success and freedom. It's not to say I don't want to make this into I don't want to make this into a classist or a capitalist thing either necessarily, because you don't need to have money to go on exciting adventures. But you do need freedom. You do need the ability to say yes to big adventures. And you need the ability to say yes to relating. And so I look back at my former codependency, and I look at the codependent behaviors of people that I see around me who I know struggle with those issues. And I'm like, what if, you guys, what if part of codependence is that we know just how amazing and just how epic true love really is? And the problem is that we're willing to compromise ourselves for it because we think that somehow that's the route to getting it. And it's not. It's very trippy, but we have to do exactly the opposite of what feels intuitive. The part of us is like, oh, you know, we're born into a capitalist heteronormative patriarchy, and we're told, oh, we have to be this, we have to be that, right? We come into this world and love is not immediately intuitive for us. Or it is, right? Sometimes it is in the heart, but it's not the way that we're told that it works, right? So we're weird, we're the odd ones out, we're having trouble finding love, and what are we told? We're told be prettier, be thinner, be thicker, be richer, be, you know, more successful, be more. And we're like, okay, and we hop on that train, and the next thing you know, we're in these codependent relationships where we're trying to say, but wait, aren't I pretty enough? Aren't I successful enough? Didn't I do enough? You know, didn't I work hard enough? Didn't I earn enough for this? And it's the wrong way. But in our hearts, we're putting all that effort forth because we know on some level just how amazing and worth it true love really is. And we have to unlearn all of that and go in the completely other direction, which is self-love and self-acceptance and being willing to hold to our boundaries and being willing to walk away and being willing to play on that big epic level and to actually believe and imagine and know that we can attract someone who can play at that same level with us and that we're worthy of that, even when it seems scarce. Just because there aren't a lot of people out there who can play on our level, who can love as fiercely or as hard as we do, or as uniquely as we do, in whatever way that we're built, doesn't mean that we can't attract that person. Just because it doesn't feel like there's a lot of them out there. If we're looking at things as a numbers game, then we're not trusting in the universe to deliver our intentions to us. And if there's anything that I can tell you, it is that playing the numbers game does not work anywhere near as well as setting your intention, discerning away from anything that is not that, and trusting in the universe to deliver you the thing that you're looking for. Yeah, it's super weird. I didn't believe it was going to work either, but it turns out that way is a lot better than the way that I was originally trying. So that's why I believe that codependency and epic love, even though they appear to be on opposite ends of the relational health spectrum, I believe that codependents do carry that blueprint for epic love within them. And they just have to learn to shed their conditioning that a sick society has told them that they have to change or earn love or prove themselves worthy of love through XYZ behaviors. But really, the reason we get those attachments is precisely because we know in our hearts just how valuable love is. And it's really just a flip of consciousness, an important one, and not necessarily an easy one to rewire, but it is just that flip that puts you right in the vibration of the kind of love that you do want to attract, because it's been in your heart all along. The problem is you just thought you had to compromise yourself to get it. So that's where I think the difference is right there. Hope this was helpful, and I will see you next time.